Greetings, drowsy spirit. Tonight, I will tell you a story that will help you fall asleep soundly. Remember to subscribe for more bedtime stories and like the video before we start. Tell me where you're watching from and what time it is in the comment section. I would also love to know what story you would want to hear next. It never occurred to me that my marriage would fall apart the way it did. I thought I had it all figured out for the majority of my 20s. A steady job, a small but cozy house, and a woman I believed I could rely on. I'm Daniel Hart, and I was raised in Maplewood, a little Ohio town. My parents instilled in me the principles of honesty, loyalty, and family via their hard work. My mom was a nurse, and my dad was a mechanic. I continued to uphold those principles in my marriage to Claire. I met Claire in college. She was gregarious, captivating, and the type of person who, simply by being present, brightened a space. I was the kind of man who liked a quiet night with close friends over a packed party. I was more reserved and pragmatic. We balanced each other out somehow. We were engaged by the time we graduated. Married a year later. Life was fantastic at first. Both of us had steady employment. She was a consultant in marketing. I was hired to work as an IT analyst. We purchased a modest home in Maplewood, which is close to my childhood home. Within 4 years, we had 2 children, Lily and Ethan. They took center stage in my life. To be honest, though, Claire and I had problems in our marriage from the beginning. She was hungry for adventure. She enjoyed the adrenaline of encountering new people, adventures, and thrills. I couldn't keep up, even though I thought I could. Our disparities grew more pronounced over time. I persuaded myself that it was a way to keep her happy without losing her as we wandered into the swinging lifestyle through some of her acquaintances. It worked for a time. At least that's what I told myself. But I secretly detested it. I was irritated by the frequent sharing of intimate details and the notion that my wife was forming relationships with other guys while I looked on. I told her I was done after a few years. Things really started to fall apart at that point. It began modestly. Claire became aloof, annoyed that I couldn't keep up with her way of life. She started going out more, but she always had an excuse. I need some air after work, supper, and girls' night. I desired to have faith in her. I hoped she would respect the limit I established. However, I saw alterations. When I entered the room, she would turn off her phone. The way she smelled of someone else's fragrance when she got home. Early mornings are replacing the late evenings. I tried to remain composed when I confronted her once. "Are you having an affair behind my back, Claire?" She laughed too soon. "You're paranoid, Daniel. I haven't become dull just because you have." It hurt what she said. I ignored it. I was unwilling to accept it. The biggest setback, however, was when our eldest child, Ethan, was given a life-threatening autoimmune disease 6 months prior to our divorce. Suddenly, our world changed. He required frequent hospital stays, prescription drugs, and close observation. I made an effort to step up while juggling the requirements of the kids, my job, and my bills. Conversely, the strain caused Claire to break. She began to drink excessively. A glass of wine in the evening at first, followed by bottles vanishing from the cupboard. With the children under her care, she would stutter home intoxicated. She was unconscious on the couch when I arrived home early, and Lily, who was just 4 at the time, was attempting to prepare a bowl of cereal for supper. I knew things had to change that night. I drove Ethan and Lily to my parents' place after packing a few suitcases and buckling them into the back car. Claire didn't even protest when I informed her that I would be gone for a bit. With a resentful, "Fine, do whatever you want," she simply waved me away. I stayed with my parents for 2 weeks, paying close attention to the children and their daily schedule. I hadn't felt so at ease in months. Then, however, a message arrived that altered everything. CLA's best friend from high school, Amy, sent it. "I believe you should be aware of what has been happening, Daniel." During girls' night, Claire shared some information with us. I am no longer able to sit on this. I gave her a call right away. Amy's voice was hesitant and low. She has been boasting about having sex with a different man each night. When she has children, she drinks. Daniel. She even acknowledged that one night she left Ethan and Lily home alone in order to go to a club and meet a guy. I was no longer able to remain silent. I felt sick to my stomach. "Are you serious?" I wish I wasn't. She further informed us that after she embezzles more money from you, she intends to file for divorce. I said, she said, I'm quoting, "Why rush when I can live rent-free and still spend his cash?" I gripped the phone and sat silently. In the most disgusting way imaginable, all of my suspicions were abruptly validated. Amy's voice cracked. "Daniel, I apologize. I understand that hearing this is difficult." I inhaled. "Amy, thank you. You just provided me with what I needed to put a definitive end to this." The following day, I returned to the residence. I refused to allow her to manipulate me from a distance. Claire barged into the room as soon as I entered and placed my luggage on the bed. "Why in the world are you here?" She lost her temper. I said evenly, "This is also my house. I will never longer leave my children here by themselves with you." She twisted her face. "Daniel, get out." "I mean it. If I have to, I'll contact the police." "Go ahead," I mumbled, holding my phone in my pocket to record the entire conversation. Reaching for her phone, she dialed 911. "Yes," she answered, her voice shaking with fictitious terror. "I would like to report domestic violence." Blue and red lights flashed outside a few minutes later. Claire stood behind the two officers with large, false teary eyes, and one of them cuffed me right away. She cried, "This man's been abusive." Upon being dragged aside by the detective, I remarked in a low voice, "I have the whole thing recorded." "She's lying." I then played the audio. The detective's face changed. An hour later, Claire was seated in the back of the squad car in handcuffs. That was the night that things started to go my way. For a week, Claire was prohibited from returning to the house. When she crashed at Amy's house, she went on a rampage rather than thinking things through. Designer clothes, a new iPhone, and new laptop. Without hesitation, she spent all of her joint account. I felt ill when I saw the balance. I went to the bank the following morning. I closed our shared credit cards, moved my investment accounts into my name alone, and took out all of the money that was remained in our savings. Claire flooded my phone with messages as soon as she learned. "You are a jerk. You have no right to interrupt me. This is something you'll regret. Daniel, I promise you that you will pay for the harm you have caused me." But it became increasingly obvious the more she raged. She was no longer in charge. Amy gave me another call a few days later. "She's not doing well, Daniel. She admitted to me that she is considering suicide." I went cold. Even though I detested her, I didn't want my children's mother to die. She was persuaded to check herself into an inpatient mental health institution by Amy. Claire agreed, which surprised me. Perhaps she desired sympathy, or perhaps she was aware that she needed assistance. In any case, it was to my advantage. It demonstrated her instability and incapacity to care for the children on her own. The hearing for the divorce started 2 weeks later. Claire arrived sober, polished, and prepared to perform. She sobbed on the stand. She claimed to the judge that I was domineering and violent, and that my brutality had sent her to a mental health facility. She was compelling. I briefly worried that the judge might accept her story. It was then my time, though. My lawyer showed the police report, the bank documents, and the recordings. One by one, her story unraveled. When Amy took the stand, that was the last straw. Amy's eyes were fixed on Claire as she spoke steadily. I saw her go downhill. I saw her abandon her children in order to have a drink and make out with random people. It made her boast. She refused to quit, even though I pleaded with her. Despite his flaws, Daniel is the only reliable dad those children have. Claire's lips was partly open as she sat motionless. Her lawyer sifting through the notes like a man gasping for air while drowning. After everything was said and done, the judge decided in my favor. Sole custody was given to me. Until Claire finished her treatment and therapy, she was only allowed to visit under supervision. The house was mine. I retained my investments. I have to keep my kids safe. 5 years have passed since that court day. Claire calmed down after a while. She continues to see Lily and Ethan, but only during the designated visitation hours. For my part, I'm at last at peace. My children are doing well. With treatment, Ethan's condition has stabilized. Lily is developing into a bright, self-assured young woman. And me? I no longer awaken to the thought of what lie will ruin my day. I occasionally reflect on the man I used to be late at night. The man who believed his marriage could be saved by swinging. The man who continued to pardon the inexcusable. I no longer recognize him. This is what I do know. I saved myself and my children by walking away. And for that, I will never apologize. I never imagined that the person I trusted the most would also be the one who could harm me the most. Marcus Reynolds is my name. I work as a project manager for a medium-sized software company and am 34 years old. Business located in Columbus, Ohio. I've been married to Claire for the past 10 years. Anybody who knew us would tell you that we were the type of couple that everyone admired, always grinning at one another in public, raising our daughter together, and enjoying family vacations whenever work permitted. However, just as in every relationship, what appears on the surface may not always reflect what occurs behind closed doors. I met Claire in college. Her field of study was education. I had a lot of business management classes going on. Her chuckle was what initially pulled me to her. It filled a space with its undiluted brightness. She gave me a sense of lightness that I had never experienced before. We may have married too young. She was 22 and I was 24. 4 years later, our daughter Lily was born. By then, I was traveling to client locations, working late, and moving up the corporate ladder. After Lily entered preschool, Claire resumed teaching part-time after initially staying at home. To be honest, the crack was tiny at first. She appeared restless, as if the suburban routine wasn't enough, and I was frequently worn out from work. I blamed growing pains for that. Marriage is difficult. That's what everyone says anyway. As soon as Lily became ill, things began to fall apart. She was given a rare autoimmune illness diagnosis last winter. Our life was suddenly filled with specialists, hospital stays, and costs that were piling up more quickly than I could handle. Despite her best efforts, I could see Claire cracking under the strain. She began to drink more. To simply take the she would tell me to edge off, but I knew it wasn't helping. I believed that the tension was tearing us apart. I was unaware that she had already begun seeking solace elsewhere. The first time I realized something wasn't right was on a Tuesday evening. Claire stated that she planned to go get groceries at approximately 7 o'clock p.m. Lily had finally fallen asleep after a prolonged period of coughing, and I was at home with her. Claire had no groceries when she returned 2 hours later. I tried to appear informal as I said, "Where's the food? God damn it, I'm such a fool." I must have talked to Jessica for ages at the store without realizing it. Jessica was one of her coworkers, but I'd never known them to hang out outside of work. That night, while she was taking a shower, I checked her phone and it was locked with a new passcode. Claire had never locked her phone before. I didn't immediately confront her. Instead, I waited and began to pay attention to her schedule and moods. She laughed it off, but her cheeks were flushed and she couldn't quite look at me. She wanted to go for a run alone on Saturday morning. One night, when she was sleeping on the couch, I used Lily's birthday to unlock her phone, and I almost puked when I saw that she had 13 different men. Not one, not two, but 13. Some of the messages were explicit, some more subdued, but they all had the same undertone: intimacy, betrayal, the kind of words that had once been meant only for me. She wasn't just unfaithful, she was reckless, meeting them in cars and hotels, sometimes even in our own home when I was away on business. I remember sitting there staring at the screen, my chest thumping so much that I thought I was going to faint. When she woke up, I dropped the phone and pretended I was asleep. My attempt to address her 2 days later was the tipping point. "Claire, we need to talk," I remarked one morning as she sipped her coffee. "About what?" I stated plainly, I know about the messages about the men, but she didn't even look up. "You went through my phone? That's what you're worried about?" My voice cracked. "You've been sleeping with half the city." The cup froze halfway to her lips. She remained motionless for a long while before setting it down and staring at me with unreadable, lifeless eyes. "Marcus, you don't understand what it's been like. I'm drowning. You're never here. I need someone. 13 someones." I snapped. She flinched, then got up and paced the kitchen. "You think I'm proud of it? You think I planned this?" I was lonely. I was angry. I looked at your phone. Her face was twisted in a way that was somewhere between defiance and shame. "Don't you dare make this about me," I said in a low, trembling voice. That was the day something died in me. I thought the betrayal was the worst part of it, that the late-night texts, the lies, and the strangers in my bed would haunt me for the rest of my life. But the true horror came a month later when I was driving Lily to one of her specialist appointments when my phone buzzed an unknown number. "Is this Marcus Reynolds?" "Yes, this is Detective Walsh with CPD." a man's voice said, "Come down to the station, please. It's about your wife." When I got to the station, the story unfolded like some nightmare I couldn't wake from. Claire had been caught trying to take another woman's baby in a supermarket parking lot. According to witnesses, she picked up the carrier and tried to walk away. When the father confronted her, she pepper sprayed him and screamed that he was the kidnapper. The police found her disoriented and smelling of vodka. She was arrested this morning. Attempted abduction. The words didn't make sense. I went to see her in holding, and she looked hollow, almost unrecognizable. They took her from me. She sobbed when she saw me. They took Lily. I was just trying to get her back, and I didn't know if she was drunk, delusional, or both. The weeks that followed were chaotic. CPS got involved, wondering if Lily was safe in our home, so I had to hire a lawyer and gather as much evidence as I could that I was the stable parent. Claire was ordered into rehab, followed by a psychiatric evaluation, and at night, I lay awake reliving everything. I filed for divorce last month, and Claire's lawyer is pushing for supervised visitation, but I don't know if I can ever trust her with our daughter again. Not after what she tried to do. People talk about monsters in dark alleys, strangers lurking with bad intentions, but my monster wore a wedding ring and slept beside me for 10 years. The worst part is that, despite everything, I still loved her, or perhaps I just loved who she used to be. I never imagined my marriage would end in horror. For years, I thought Sophie and I were the couple that everyone envied. We had a modest home in the suburbs outside of Seattle, steady jobs, a circle of friends we'd made together, and even a silly Labrador named Milo who seemed to complete the picture. I was 31 and an engineer for a logistics company, and Sophie was 29 and worked in marketing for a mid-sized tech company downtown. We had been married for 6 years. There had been arguments, of course, but nothing that would have made you think the foundation was collapsing. However, I suppose that rots gradually until you realize the entire house is sinking. Sophie had always been open-minded, leaving her phone on the counter while taking a shower and not caring if I looked at it. However, gradually, almost imperceptibly, she began to carry it everywhere, tilting the screen away when I passed and locking it as soon as she was finished. At first, I dismissed it, thinking that perhaps she simply needed some privacy because work was stressful for both of us. However, then came the late nights, client dinners, networking events, and last-minute meetings. One Tuesday, she entered the room at almost midnight with a strong wine odor on her breath. I was sitting at the kitchen table, still awake. I said, "You're late," without attempting to come out as accusatory. She left her handbag at the door. The work took a long time. Her jaw tensed as she continued. "I told you. You said you'd be home by 9. Ethan," I said, "not everything is on schedule. You of all people should know that." I stopped pushing, but my stomach began to grow uneasy. The uneasiness only grew during the ensuing weeks. Sophie wouldn't show me the text she was laughing at while glued to her phone. We started talking incoherently, like if we were just roommates organizing shopping lists. Then her phone buzzed on the counter one Saturday morning while she was taking a shower. The name came to life. Dom and Cole. I kept my hands off of it. I didn't have to. I could tell everything just by the way she grabbed it as soon as she emerged from the restroom. Suspicion is similar to a disease. It consumes you until you're either proven correct or incorrect. My stomach was screaming, but I attempted to give her the benefit of the doubt. I chose to follow her one Friday after she mentioned that she had a late work supper. I waited after parking a few blocks away from her workplace. Indeed, at approximately 7 p.m., Sophie left, crossing the street to a sleek black vehicle that was sitting under a streetlight instead of heading into the garage where she typically parks. The motorist took a step, went outside to let her in. He had a great suit, was older than I had anticipated, and had a confidence that fills a room before he even speaks. He was in his mid-40s. Sophie slipped inside after giving him a cheek kiss. I felt like I would faint from the tightness in my chest. They took a car to a peaceful eatery by the water. Watching them giggle over candlelight like it was a goddamn dating scene from a movie, I sat across the street in my car, fists squeezing the wheel till my knuckles became white. I was positive it was that night. I was sitting in the dark living room when she returned home later. I said softly, "How was the client dinner?" With the keys still in her hand, she froze. "It was all right." "Why? Who is Damien?" The color left her face. She stammered as she attempted to recover. He is merely a co-worker. I caught you laughing and holding his hand at the restaurant. Sophie, don't tell me lies. Tears filled her eyes, but they weren't the kind that pleaded for forgiveness. They were irate and defensive. Ethan, you don't understand. You're always exhausted from working. He pays attention to me, Damien. I feel alive because of him. Invisible, I've been drowning here. I wanted to hurl something, yell, and smash all the delicate furniture in that room. Rather, I muttered, so your solution was to crawl into someone else's bed. She looked down, and I could tell our marriage was over when she was silent. The divorce would have been clean, but unpleasant. Sadly, Sophie's lover was more than a passing fancy. Damon Cole remained a shadow that would not go. It seemed subtle at first. Across the street, an automobile was parked for too long. When I glanced again, I couldn't see the shadow of a man in the grocery store. One evening, I came home to find cigarette butts scattered near the garage. Neither Sophie nor I smoked. I challenged her. Is Damien aware of our residence? I made a demand. She paused. I may have brought it up. Did you bring him here, or did you mention it? I could tell everything from her quiet. You gave him access to our house. Her voice broke. That wasn't the case. All he wanted to see was my residence. He's concerned about me. Do you care? I lost my temper. He is pursuing us. At night, he is circling the home. That is a lack of concern. Obsession is what that is. Her features flickered with terror for the first time. She didn't abandon him, though. At 3 a.m., 2 weeks later. The sound of the back door banging awakened me up. My heart was racing. I snuck into the kitchen and picked up the baseball bat by the bed. Like someone trying to push their way in, the handle trembled furiously. My voice was shaking as I yelled. Who's there? There was no more rattling. Quiet. Next, a chilly, serene voice floated through the door. I called the police, but by the time they got there, Damien was gone. When I told Sophie, she shook her head, saying, You're just paranoid. Paranoid. That word haunted me, because paranoia doesn't leave notes under your windshield wiper. She doesn't love you anymore, Ethan. Let her go before I make you. My blood ran cold. Filed for divorce. Sophie moved out with Milo, and I thought this would put an end to things, but it didn't. Damien became more aggressive, blocking calls in the middle of the night, breathing heavily before a click, and leaving voicemails that said things like, You'll never keep her away from me. I would walk out to my car and find footprints in the dew on the hood, and once I woke up to the sound of my name being whispered outside the bedroom window. The police filed reports, but provided little else. Restraining orders don't stop men like him, one officer muttered. And he was correct. I was home alone the night it reached a breaking point. A week prior, the divorce had been official, and Sophie was gone forever, though occasionally I caught I was waiting for her footsteps when my phone rang at midnight with a text from an unknown number that said, Look outside. My throat became dry. I drew back the curtains slowly. Instead of hurrying or hiding, Damien waited beneath the light post across the street, grinning as if he had endless time. One more text. She filled me in on everything. The air she breathes is not yours to breathe. With trembling hands, I secured all the windows and doors and dialed 911. However, he had left by the time the police showed up. Not gone, but gone, because the voicemails, blocked calls, and texts continued after that night. Even after 10 years, with a new wife and a new life across the nation, I still get shivers when my phone rings from an unknown number because I know Damon Cole is still out there, watching, waiting, and I worry that one day he may come out of the shadows once more. I had no idea how quickly the word forever could fall apart. You can call me Adrian Walker. My age is 34. I was the type of guy who had his life together, according to those who knew me a few years ago. I had 2 children, a stable job, a wonderful wife, and a respectable house in a more tranquil area of Lexington, Kentucky. Everything appeared solid from the outside. However, the truth is that my life was falling apart long before anyone noticed. I was raised in a working-class household. My mom worked double shifts as a nurse, and my dad was a truck driver who was constantly on the road. Although they were difficult individuals, affectionate in their own manner. They taught me 2 things: put in a lot of effort and don't avoid accountability. That stayed with me. I think that's the reason I fell so deeply for Samantha. She was completely different from me. She was loud where I was silent. She leaped without looking where I hesitated. She and I met at a barbecue with mutual acquaintances when we were 25. She was the type of lady who could somehow make herself the focus of attention when she entered a crowded space. I swear it felt like the ground moved beneath me as she laughed at a stupid joke I said about hot dogs burning. She was described as a wild card by everyone. Caleb, my best friend, forewarned me beforehand. Sam is entertaining, but she's not settled. You're a steady person. She will grow disinterested. I dismissed him. I know her better than you do. Less than 2 years later, we were married. A wedding in the courthouse, followed by a celebration in a leased hall with inexpensive beer and string lights. I thought it was ideal, even though it wasn't glamorous. We took up residence in a modest starter home with 2 bedrooms, a cracked driveway, and peeling shutters. It made no difference. We had a life to build. We talk about the moment when everything falls into place, and I felt we'd finally achieved that stride when our son Eli was born. 3 years later, our daughter Maya came along. Yes, I was tired, but I was also delighted. I knew exactly who I was living for when I woke up each morning. Samantha, however, changed. I initially assumed it was simply stress. My grueling hours at the accounting firm, 2 children, and mounting bills. She grumbled that I was no longer enjoyable and that my main concerns were work and accountability. I dismissed it, believing it to be a passing phase. Then Eli became ill. At age 6, he was identified as having a rare autoimmune disease. This is the type of diagnosis that comes like a freight train. Medication schedules, endless doctor's appointments, and evenings when we were constantly monitoring his breathing caused us to hardly sleep. For him, I poured myself into being strong. Samantha didn't. She began to drink more. After work, a glass of wine became half a bottle. On weekends, she would go out with friends and then arrive about 2 a.m. The smell of perfume and smoking that wasn't hers. She would become irate when I asked questions. Adrian, don't begin. Because you work late and bring home your tidy little salary, you believe you have everything figured out. What's like to be stuck here all day is beyond your comprehension. I couldn't get that term out of my thoughts. She wasn't discussing the stress or Eli's sickness. She was referring to us. I attempted to explain it. She needed space and was overburdened, I told myself. It wasn't what it appeared to be, I told myself. But I knew in my heart. Her phone was the first thing that happened. Small things like how she abruptly added a passcode when she had previously not cared, or how she tilted the screen away when she texted. Her phone was buzzing on the coffee table when she slept off on the couch one evening. My chest constricted. I promised myself that I would respect her privacy and not peek, but my hands had other ideas. A message appeared on the screen. I can't get last night off my mind. I felt sick to my stomach. The number was retained as digits only, without a name. I scrolled back with trembling fingers. In addition to late-night confessions and flirtatious texts, the thread contained one message that I will never forget. You're leaving him when? I remained motionless, gazing at the words until my vision became blurry. I felt cold all around. I did not immediately confront her. A part of me wanted to deny it, to think it was an error, even a terrible practical joke. However, I received my confirmation a week later. Samantha informed me that she and her friend Heather were going out. Her tone sounded strange, too informal. I informed Caleb. He gave me a look I will never forget, and he had never trusted her. You already know, man. Don't wait for her to come clean. Do you want the truth? Go with her. I detested the thought. That was not a guy I wanted to be. However, you do things you vowed never to do out of desperation. After she departed that Saturday night, I got into my car and drove away. She did not visit Heather's place. She never even visited a bar. Off the freeway, she parked into the parking lot of an inexpensive motel. I pulled into a parking space far enough away to see her exit, smooth her dress, and meet a man who emerged from a black truck. He was taller than me, wider, and had that arrogant confidence exhibited by men who are aware of their problems. Like an adolescent, she rushed into his arms. I believe I felt a tear well up inside of me as they kissed. I waited for her to emerge for almost an hour while feeling numb and watching the neon vacancy sign flicker. When she did, she was laughing. Her hair was untidy, and her makeup was smudged. She was laughing with him like she hadn't in years. Not me. That evening, I was sitting in the kitchen with the lights off when she got home. When she spotted me, she leaped. Adrian, you frightened me. Jesus. What have you been up to? I simply gazed at her. Who is he? The color left her face. She attempted a laugh, then shut her mouth after opening it. What are you discussing? Sam, don't tell me lies. I trailed you. Words could not compare to the quiet that ensued. She was aware. I was aware. It cannot be undone. My chest felt like it was about to collapse as she finally murmured, his name's Tyler. For what length of time? Nearly a year. 1 year. She was slinking off to a motel with another man while I was sitting in hospital rooms with our son and working double shifts to cover medical fees. She recoiled as I smacked my hand against the table. For him, you ruined this family. She was suddenly innocent as her eyes tightened. She was upset. You have no right to blame me for this. Adrian, you checked out a long time ago. You abandoned me and immersed yourself in your work, bills, and sense of responsibility. Tyler restores my sense of vitality. Alive. It was a knife-twisted term. I didn't throw her out that night, even though I wish I could. I still harbored feelings for her. A part of me held on to the dream that we could make things right for Maya and Eli. We tried therapy. It was unsuccessful. Her heart wasn't there, but she went through the motions. Then things became more sinister. Eli was crying in his room when I arrived home early one evening from work. He uttered, "Mommy's with a friend again," in a feeble voice. The tipping point came when she said, she forgot to give me my medicine. There was no negotiating my son's health. Without hesitation, I went up to her once more. Sam, you're done. Tomorrow, I want to take you out. She gave a sneer. Do you really believe you can simply throw me out? This is also my home. Remember, I could bring the kids. I was completely chilled by that warning. She wasn't merely careless. She posed a threat. When I got home from work a week later, the house was in ruins. Furniture was overturned, drawers were jerked open, plates were broken, and Tyler was standing in the center of it all. He smelled of booze, his shirt partly unbuttoned, and he was inebriated. He muttered, "She told me you'd be at work." He smiled and said, "Get the hell out of my house." Your house. She's finished with you, friend. She's mine now. Samantha, who was also intoxicated, staggered in from the kitchen before I could reply. Don't make this worse, Adrian. Just leave us alone. I couldn't believe what I was hearing in my own house with my children here when Tyler lunged. He gave me a hard shove that sent me crashing into the wall. I heard Caleb's voice in my head over blurry vision. Stop waiting for her to confess. You already know. I grabbed the baseball bat I kept by the back door. I didn't swing it, but I held it between us, my voice shaking. Get out. Tyler sned, but something in my eyes must have registered because he pulled Samantha by the arm and staggered out. I filed for divorce the following morning. The custody battle was brutal. Samantha portrayed me as cold, controlling, and careless. But the evidence, the drinking, the affair, and the neglect of Eli's medical care was on my side, and I ultimately won primary custody. Samantha worsened after Tyler left her, and I haven't seen her in over a year. The kids are adjusting, and sometimes I'm a loss for words. However, we're gradually getting better. On some nights, when the house is quiet, I sit in the dark and relive everything. The motel parking lot, the text messages, the laughter that wasn't for me. And I wonder how love can turn into something so cruel. I was 32 when I discovered my wife was cheating on me. And to be fair, it wasn't a sudden epiphany or some movie-like moment where I walked in and saw her in bed with someone else. Rather, it was slow, subtle, and a creeping suspicion that grew over time until it wrapped itself around my throat so tightly that I couldn't breathe without choking on it. My wife's name is Melissa, but most people call her Mel. We've been married for 7 years, nearly 10 years, and her smile, long chestnut hair, deep hazel eyes that change color depending on the light, and her quick wit that used to make me laugh so hard I couldn't breathe. She worked in graphic design, and I was studying business. She had been sketching a coffee shop when I asked if I could borrow her pencil. I didn't need it. I just wanted to talk to her. That one moment turned into a whole night of conversation, and by the time the baristas were cleaning the floors and locking up, I knew I had met the person I wanted to marry. For years, it was really good, better than good. She was my partner, my best friend, and my safe haven. However, things gradually changed in ways I nearly missed until it was too late. She began staying late at work more frequently. I told myself it was stress, that maybe I was imagining things, that I was paranoid, but deep down I knew. One night, about 6 months before everything fell apart, I confronted her. We were sitting on the couch, the TV on, but muted, and she had her phone in her hand, scrolling, her thumb moving in these little flicks. She would smile at her phone when she thought I wasn't looking. During dinner, there was a distance in her eyes, as if her body was sitting across from me, but her mind was somewhere else entirely. "Just work stuff," she said, looking at me with a composed expression and keen eyes. "Why?" I pushed, "Work stuff at 11 at night." And she said, "Yeah." "Diners don't care about what time it is," she said flatly. There was no warmth in her voice, no joking defense, just coldness. I wanted to push further, but I saw how she tightened her jaw, how her entire body seemed to close off, and I let it drop. That was my mistake. Fast forward 6 months, and by then, I had gathered enough small pieces of evidence to know for sure. A lipstick-stained receipt from a bar across town in her purse, a random men's hoodie tucked in the back seat of her car, and the fact that she showered as soon as she got home late at night. I had two options: confront her directly or find a way to truly know the truth. And this is the part that still chills me, because if I had just confronted her, screamed, divorced, I would not have gone through what I did if I'd thrown her out, but I went with option number 2. I followed her on a Friday night in mid-November, and she told me that she was meeting a client for a late-night brainstorming session. I nodded, kissed her cheek, and told her to have fun. I waited for 10 minutes, kept a few cars back, and slipped out while my pulse pounded so loudly that I could hear it in my ears. She drove across town, past the office building she allegedly worked at, and into a neighborhood I didn't recognize. She pulled up to a small bar called The Lantern, a dimly lit dive tucked between two pawn shops. I parked a block away and watched from the shadows, and that's when I saw him. He was tall, muscular, and had bright red hair that stood out even under the flickering street light. If he owned the entire establishment. He leaned against the bar's entryway. He put his arms around Melissa's waist and planted a kiss on her as soon as she got out of her car. My chest began to sag. My best friend, my wife, and my partner were kissing another man the way she used to kiss me. I ought to have charged at them. Ought to have pulled her away. Ought to have taken action. However, I didn't. Rather, I observed. Like a coward, I followed them inside. The Lantern was noisy, but it wasn't packed. People laughing, glasses clinking, music blaring. In order to observe them, I crept into a booth close to the rear. Melissa sat at the bar with a red-haired guy, who we'll call Derek. She placed a drink order. She chuckled too loudly and flirtatiously. He whispered in her ear as he drew close. Then an odd thing occurred. I thought she might nurse a drink or two. Rather, she continued to place orders for herself, him, and other strangers in the area. Despite the fact that we had been arguing over bills for months, she was giving everyone drinks, grinning, joking, and appearing as though money was no problem. It was illogical. She once swiveled in her chair and looked directly at me from the other side of the bar. My blood turned to ice that I believed she had caught me, but she quickly looked past me to a younger man seated close by. With the same smile she used to give me, she leaned in his direction and offered to buy him a shot. I came to a realization at that point. She was hunting, not just cheating. I am aware of how absurd it may seem, but the events that followed have scarred me forever. The young man she was aiming for appeared anxious but eager, just 21. Like predators, Melissa and Derek were at his sides, giggling, encouraging him, and shoving drink after drink down his neck. Melissa massaged his arm, whispered something to him, and assured him that she would look after him when his friend attempted to step in. She persisted. The friend wavered, caught between devotion and the seductive allure of a stunning woman. At last, Melissa smiled sweetly and leaned in to say, "You can come if you want to." My stomach turned over. It had nothing to do with alcohol. This has nothing to do with cheating. It was a darker thing. Every instinct told me to get up, get out, contact the police, or do something else, but I was unable to move as I sat motionless. Together with Melissa and Derek, the boys departed. I staggered behind them, keeping my distance to avoid being seen. They crammed themselves into Melissa's car. Derek took the wheel. They drove up to a little, dilapidated house on the outskirts of town, and I followed them as they went through back streets. I turned off my engine and observed. The boys stumbled into the house. Melissa is in the lead. Derek shut the door after them. There was nothing for several minutes. After that, I noticed shadows shifting beneath the blinds. Heard something heavy thumping against the floor, a man's muffled cry, a woman's chuckle, and faint voices. It made my skin crawl. I was aware that those boys would not leave again if I did nothing. However, I was unable to push myself to the door. Didn't want to be noticed. God knows what transpired inside, but I sat there clutching the steering wheel until my knuckles became white. The door opened after what seemed like hours. Melissa was the first to leave, her makeup smudged and her hair disheveled. Derek arrived behind her with a hefty object wrapped in a dark blanket. They put it in the trunk of Melissa's vehicle, forcefully closed it, and departed into the darkness. Until the tail lights went out, I remained motionless. Then, with trembling legs, I staggered out of my car and slithered in the direction of the house. The door was not locked. Something metallic and the riot of booze filled the air inside. There was chaos in the living room. Empty bottles, overturned chairs, and a patch of red on the wooden floor. My throat was stuck with my heart. I was afraid to go any farther. I took off running. I didn't get any sleep that night. I was unable to. Each time I shut Melissa's smile, her laughter, and the blanket being carried out the door were all visible to me. She returned home the following morning as if nothing had occurred, asked if I wanted pancakes, and gave me a cheek kiss. I tried to make sense of the woman in front of me and the monster I had seen the night before as I gazed at her numbly. It dawned on me. Nobody would believe me if I told anyone. She was ideal, endearing, and adored by family, friends, and co-workers. My marriage was disintegrating, and I was just the worried spouse. I remained silent. Weeks went by. Months after, Melissa continued to cheat, slip out at night, and smile at random people. And each time I pondered the number of people who failed to return home. She never killed anyone that I witnessed. Blood was never seen on her hands. However, I seen enough to know the reality. Worst of all, I still had feelings for her. 2 years have passed since then. We are no longer together. I was unable to stay. I was no longer able to watch. However, I occasionally come across a missing persons report late at night when I'm scrolling through the local news. A woman who went out for drinks and never returned, a young man, a college student. And I'm not sure why I'm writing this every time I see Melissa grin. Perhaps it's because I need someone to trust me. Perhaps because I want people to know it was her if I ever get hurt. My wife, Melissa, the huntress, the one I adored. My life fell apart when I was 31 years old. The life that was actually taking place behind my back and the life that I believed I had. I still consider myself to be a grounded guy back then. I've lived in Ravenbrook, Pennsylvania, a sleepy river town where everyone knows one another's business for the most of my life. My name is Ethan Ward. The ranch house where I grew up is still occupied by my parents. I had stability even though I wasn't wealthy. I had consistent hours and good income as a project coordinator for a construction supply firm. I had a beat-up Ford pickup, a 2-story house of my own, and what I believed to be a solid marriage. Lena was her name. We had been married for 5 years and together for nearly 10. When we were both 21, we met at a coffee shop close to the Penn State campus. Her field of study was accountancy. Project management classes buried me. She was kind, quick to laugh, and often asked me questions that gave me the impression that I was important. She apologized so profusely that I had to giggle when she spilled her iced latte on me on our first meeting. That tumultuous beginning somehow evolved into a relationship I believed would endure forever. However, nothing endures forever. Not in the way you think. Our marriage was good at first. It's better than fine. We had late-night disputes, small road trips, and takeaway on Friday nights. Regarding films, she encouraged me to look after myself. I urged her to work on becoming a certified public accountant. I believed that we were in equilibrium with one another for a time. After that, Lena began working for Ravenbrook's largest accounting firm, Grant & Cole Accounting. Things changed at that point. She worked greater hours. She stayed late for dinners with clients. She was always texting, but not with me. When I entered the room, she tilted her phone away. Additionally, she gave me shorter, finer, busier, and more stressful responses each time I asked how her day was going. I initially held myself responsible. Perhaps I wasn't listening closely enough. Perhaps marriage just naturally become quiet. But I knew in the back of my mind, Damon Cole was the name of the man who completely upended my life. On Thursday night in early October, I received my first unmistakable indicator. We always spent Thursday nights together, so I remember. We would order Thai, watch a dumb movie, and then relax and have a good time. However, at about 6:15 p.m. that evening, Lena texted me. Avoid waiting up. Review at the end of the quarter. It could be late. Until 8:30, when I heard her car pull into the driveway, I didn't give it any thought. Her hair was disheveled. Her makeup was slightly smudged, and she had a strong, musky scent that stuck to her clothing as she entered. Long night? I said, trying to seem cool. Yeah, she hurriedly replied, dropping her bag. Before I could say anything more, she vanished upstairs, saying, I'm beat. I'm going to shower. Later, her phone buzzed on the nightstand while she was taking a shower. I swear that something inside of me knew, even though I don't usually snoop. My chest tightened as the screen preview read. Last night was incredible. Can't stop thinking about you. Damien, the sender. I was acquainted with him. He was a partner in her company. At their Christmas party, I had shaken his hand once. I felt like a child standing next to him because of his flawless teeth, great suit, and confidence-boosting exercises. The communication was not opened by me. I was unable to. Later, as Lena crawled into bed, I simply put the phone down again, my hands quivering, and acted like I was asleep. The trust died on that night. My oldest friend Victor Hayes and I had been going to the same pub since college, so we met up the following day. Victor was the type of friend that didn't mince words. Very honest, often to the detriment of others. With a hushed voice and eyes darting across the bar as if I were disclosing state secrets, I told him everything. Victor crossed his arms and leaned back. You know what that is, Ethan? It's not a text for work. That isn't innocent. I murmured, I don't want to make assumptions. He looked at me sharply. You already know the ending, man. Avoid deceiving yourself. You spent 10 years with her. She is someone you know. It's real if you can feel it. My stomach sunk with his words like stones. I made an effort to remain composed, but after a week I broke. We were silently having dinner. I placed my fork there. Lena, are you seeing someone else? She said, bringing her head up with wide, nearly angry eyes. What? Ethan, no. Why would you even? Because I'm not stupid, I muttered down. I noticed a text from you, and you're unusual and aloof. She looked exhausted. She was stoned for a time. She then shook her head in an attempt to recover. It isn't what you believe. Simply said, Damien flirts with everyone. It's not harmful. It was amazing last night. It's not harmful. She pulled away from the table after opening and closing her mouth. Right now, I don't want to argue over this. She left me at the table, staring at my unfinished meal, and went upstairs. I became aware that I was living with a stranger at that point. It was a terrible enough betrayal. The aspect that still keeps me up at night, though, is what transpired next. It began with murmurs. On some evenings, I would hear Lena conversing in the kitchen below when she thought I was asleep. She heard frantic, low murmurs as if someone was beside her. However, the chamber was deserted when I descended. The rear door was locked. On occasion, I would see her standing in the dark by the living room window, gazing blankly. I once woke up at 3 in the morning to see her smiling too broadly and responding, just thinking, to discover that her side of the bed was vacant. I froze and padded downstairs. Lena was standing in the center of the kitchen, looking toward the corner as though someone was there, but there was nobody there. Something was whispered by her lips that I couldn't hear. She whirled around, her eyes wild, as I called her name. Her smile seemed to be pulled unnaturally broad by something, and for a moment, I swear to God, it stretched too far. Ethan, she uttered quietly, return to your bed. Although I didn't want to, I did because I was afraid. 2 weeks later was the tipping point. I had dozed off on the sofa. Approximately 2:45 a.m. I was awakened by a loud thud coming from upstairs. As I picked up a flashlight and made my way up, my heart was racing. There was a jar on the bedroom door. Lena was not alone inside. It wasn't Damien, though. By the bed, there was another object. A tall, ebony person stooped. A hideous smile spread from ear to ear across its face. eyes that burn in the dark like white lamps. Lena, too. No, Lena wasn't yelling. She wasn't battling. She stood next to it, her mouth open in the same unfathomable smile, her head cocked abnormally. And simultaneously, they both turned to face me. "Ethan," she said in a voice that wasn't her own. "Never should you have glanced at the phone." I lost the flashlight in my hands. I have no memory of running. My pickup was parked miles away at Victor's residence when I woke up hours later, weeping, trembling, unable to articulate. Lena was gone when I returned to the house at dawn. Her belongings and clothing disappeared. No trace, no note. Since then, I haven't seen her. The cops stared at me as if I were hiding something, but they nevertheless filed a missing person report. How could I be honest with them? That I wasn't the victim of my wife's infidelity. Something inhuman would have entered our house through her. At least Victor acts as though he believes me. When I can't bear to sleep alone in that house, he lets me stay at his apartment. But occasionally, late at night, I spot Damien's car parked in front of the accounting firm when I drive by. Additionally, I swear that occasionally I see a tall, dark shadow observing from the window upstairs. Almost a year has passed, and I'm still unsure of which is worse: losing Lena to something else or to another man. However, each time I close my eyes, her voice reverberates and I see her smile. In the absence of light, never should you have glanced at the phone. I never imagined myself to be a man who had doubts about his own wife. I'm Ethan Mercer, and I was raised in a little Pennsylvania village where everyone knew one another. The concept that marriage was precious, something you fought for, and something you treasured was instilled in me by my parents, who had been married for 38 years. I believed I would spend my old age with Rachel, whom I met when I was 26. She was a kind and astute nurse with a grin that could brighten even the gloomiest of days. I was handling subcontractors and deadlines as a construction project manager at the time. Despite my constant fatigue, I was always proud of the job I did. I met Rachel at a coffee shop close to the hospital. I assisted her in cleaning up after she spilled half of her cappuccino and dropped her purse. That casual encounter evolved into a discussion, which in turn led to a date. We fell in love right away. Perhaps too soon. We were married within a year. In Philadelphia, we rented a modest 2-bedroom apartment with drafty windows and plaster walls that were broken. However, we were content, or I believe that we were. The initial years were successful. Yes, we had financial difficulties, but Rachel was always there for me, and I respected her for working long, hard hours. We discussed having children, purchasing a home in the future, and taking trips that we would never be able to afford. In addition to being my wife, she was also my best friend. However, a marriage takes time to fall apart. It deteriorates gradually and subtly until you eventually notice that the person at the dinner table across from you feels unfamiliar. It began modestly. Rachel started taking on more shifts, frequently complaining that the hospital was understaffed. She would arrive home too tired to speak, sometimes after midnight. I trusted her. I did, of course. Nurses put in crazy hours. It was not out of the ordinary. The secrets, however, followed. She began carrying her phone everywhere, including into the restroom. Texting made her chuckle in a different, more intimate way. She dismissed my question by saying, "Don't be paranoid. It's just Emily from work." Her aroma also changed. Not her scent. She wore the same lotion with a vanilla aroma every time. When she got home, I would give her a hug. And there was something else, something male, beneath the subtle hospital disinfectant smell. At first, I disregarded it. I told myself I was having hallucinations. However, I woke up one night at approximately 11:45 to discover the bed was empty. Rachel wasn't at home. Hours ago, her shift was meant to end. No one answered when I called her. I texted but got no response. Until 2 a.m., I sat on the couch and gazed at the clock. When she eventually entered, her cheeks were flushed and her hair was moist as if she had taken a shower somewhere else. She said she had an urgent procedure and had to stay late. I pretended to believe her and nodded. However, something changed within. Something murmured in the recesses of my thoughts. She's telling lies. I became more aware. She suddenly put more care in her looks and changed her attire for work. She had on lipstick. She never wore it before. She occasionally averted her face away from me when I kissed her. She was taking a shower one evening when she left her phone on the counter. A message buzzed through it. I ought not to have seen. I'm aware of it. Yet my curiosity got the better of me. Mark Hospital was the name that flashed on the screen. Last night was incredible. Can't stop thinking about you. The message said same time tomorrow. My heart stopped beating. When she emerged from the restroom, grinning as if nothing had happened, I put the phone back precisely where it had been, my hands shaking. I was collapsing on the inside, but I forced myself to act normal. I didn't blow up immediately. Perhaps I wanted to be mistaken and gather more evidence before shattering the idea of our marriage. Thus, I listened, observed, and waited. I followed her when she informed me that she would be covering another late shift a week later. I watched the hospital's entrance while I parked across the street. At approximately 8:30 p.m., she left. In a tiny black dress I had never seen before, but not in scrubs. My stomach turned over. She did not go to the wing of the hospital. A tall man wearing a leather jacket embraced her as she walked down the block. They had a kiss beneath a street lamp, Mark. It was a full, desperate kiss, not a brief peck. My knuckles became white as I clamped down on the steering wheel. My entire being wants to storm and tear him away from her across the street. However, I didn't. I watched with a broken heart as the woman I loved vanished into a hotel with another man. I pretended for weeks after that. I bid her farewell with a kiss every morning. I questioned her about her shifts every night and nodded while she lied. I was screaming within. I was unable to eat or sleep. The traitor gave me a nod. There was a parasite deep in my chest. The dream then began. I would be sweating when I woke up in the middle of the night, certain that I had heard noises in the flat. I would hear whispers of my own name and saw shadows coming close to the room's corner. Perhaps it was the tension. Perhaps my mind was collapsing beneath the weight of my knowledge. However, the distinction between nightmare and reality became hazy. I swear that one night when I was lying awake, I felt the bed dip as though someone else had taken a seat next to me. Rachel was sleeping with her back to the wall when I turned around, expecting to see her. Still in the darkness, I felt a hand brush across mine. On a Sunday afternoon, I addressed her. "Who's Mark?" I blurted out as she was folding laundry in the living room, and she froze. Something hanging from her hands was a sock. Her wide eyes shot to mine. In a panic. "What are you discussing? Don't tell me lies. I noticed you. I trailed you." Weeks of suppressed anger caused my voice to break. Tears filled her eyes as her face fell apart. Just tell me the truth, Ethan." She started crying and confessed everything. That it began as innocuous office flirting. That she didn't intend for things to get this far. That she felt lonely with me. And that she was constantly busy. Excuses, excuses. "You ruined us," I muttered. "I love you, Ethan, please. I promise it was an error." However, the picture of her kissing him kept coming back to me, piercing me repeatedly. I let her know that I needed room. I felt nauseous just looking at her. I slept on the couch that night. I awoke to the sound of whispering once more around midnight. With my heart racing, I sat up. I thought I saw a figure standing in the hallway, although it was dark in the apartment. "Rachel," I called. No response. I got up and moved in closer. The person disappeared, but as I turned to see Rachel standing in the kitchen, staring at me with a blank expression on her face and hollow eyes, I said, "Are you okay?" She simply turned and walked back to the bedroom without answering. The bed was vacant and the covers were cold when I followed. But there was a message on her pillow. My pulse froze when I read, "Our home." My nightmares were reflected in the words. I briefly questioned whether betrayal and anguish had finally broken me. The following morning, I got a call. The hospital was the location. The previous evening, Rachel had been involved in an automobile accident. She didn't survive, they said. My phone fell out of my grasp. She was standing there, staring at me with those dead eyes, and I thought of the kitchen. Who or what was at my apartment that night, if she had passed away before I saw her? 2 years have passed since that evening. I've attempted to rebuild my life and move cities, but the scars still exist. The faint sound of my name reverberating through the darkness is what wakes me up some nights. There are moments when I think I see her image in the mirror behind me. Additionally, I occasionally find a folded note on my porch after returning from work. The same words every time. Our house. I'll never be able to tell if it's my guilt manifested or her ghost. All I know is that I used to think the worst thing a man could experience was betrayal. I was mistaken, because you are not the only victim of treachery in life. It comes after you. I never imagined that I would be a man who told such a tale. Those who knew me as a child would have described me as predictable in the safest sense of the word. A calm man who doesn't like to stir up trouble. However, life has a way of showing you that being average does not shield you from terror or betrayal. I'm Daniel Hartman, and Hartford, Connecticut is where I was raised. For 45 years, my parents were devoted to their traditional marriage. I'd had that image of love in my mind my entire life. I believed that everything else would fall into place once you discovered the perfect person. Just two people navigating the world together. No cracks, no questions. In college, I got to know Rachel. Even though she wasn't particularly ostentatious or the loudest person in the room, she exuded a warmth that helped me relax before an exam. She was the kind of girl you presented to your parents and who immediately had your mother mentally prepare the wedding. To be honest, my mother did. Rachel and I were married by the time I was 28. We had purchased a small home on a peaceful street close to West Hartford that would be suitable for us and possibly a child in the future. Rachel was teaching at a nearby elementary school, and I was putting in long hours as a financial analyst. Life was stable and predictable. I wanted that. However, looking back, perhaps steady was also risky. I felt a delusion of security, as if nothing could harm us. And when tiny fissures began to appear, I told myself they were simply stress or that this is a common occurrence in couples. In ways she had never experienced before, Rachel grew addicted to her phone. When I walked by, she would turn the screen away or say she was simply looking at the lesson plans. She started frequently staying late at school. I grade papers, she would remark. I first trusted her. Even though I wanted to trust her, there were nights when I sat drinking beer on the couch and watched the clock tick past midnight, and I couldn't help but feel uneasy. I said one evening, half in jest, half as a test, she stopped for a split second before forcing a giggle. Baby, you got a secret second family with how late you're staying at school. We both laughed it off, but I sensed a change inside. Yeah, Daniel, you caught me. Whole other husband and kids. You're too sharp. Her voice didn't sound lighthearted. It sounded defensive. On a chilly Friday evening in December, the actual unraveling began. One of my worst work weeks was just over. Coming home, ordering pizza, and spending time with her, perhaps watching some stupid holiday film, was what I wanted to do. The lights were off when I entered the house. Rachel wasn't at home. I sent her a text. Me, where have you gone? I ordered pizza. Rachel is still in school. Large-scale project. Avoid waiting up. The pit in my stomach became more sinister. A whispering sound. Check now. See for yourself. So I did. I parked my car across the street and drove to her school. It was dark in the building. Inside, there are no lights on. There are no vehicles in the lot. A silver Honda, that is. Rachel wasn't in the school, but she did have her car. I waited. My breath was fogging up the windshield, and my hands were trembling. Minutes passed slowly. When I eventually spotted her, she wasn't by herself. She left out the side entrance with a tall, dark-jacketed man who seemed to be speaking something special to her. She chuckled. She put her hand on his arm. Then, for heaven's sake, they shared a kiss. My entire body became numb. How I got home is a mystery to me. Anger made everything hazy. For 30 minutes, I sat in the driveway, clutching the steering wheel until my knuckles became white. Later that evening, I was waiting in the kitchen when she eventually returned home. Grading papers at night? My voice was tight as I asked. She was surprised, then irritated. Please don't begin, Daniel. I'm worn out. I lost my temper. I saw him with you at the school, Rachel. You dare not tell me lies. The color left her face. I thought for a moment that she would lose it, express regret, ask for pardon. However, she didn't. Rather, she became icy. What have you did, then? Flatly, she said. I was more affected by that than by the actual betrayal. Just acceptance. No shame, no denial. How long have you been skulking about behind my back? I insisted. Her quiet was sufficient response. That night, we battled for hours. She sobbed as I yelled. She then yelled back. Everything that I believed to be stable in my life fell apart. Tension lasted for weeks, then months. Sleeping in different rooms. Screaming matches evolved from whisper battles. Here's the problem, though. This was no ordinary tale of a marriage ending tragically. The nightmare started at this point, because my adultery ended with something far darker than the attorneys and documents that most cheating finishes with. The first SMS message arrived in late January. An unidentified number. The complete truth is unknown to you. At first, I assumed it was spam, but then I saw another. She's not simply being unfaithful. She has a more sinister plan. I felt shivers running up my arms as I gazed at the TV. Who is this? I surreptitiously accessed Rachel's phone that evening while she was taking a shower. Not all of her messages to the guy were erased, but the majority were. I felt sick to my stomach when I saw it. Him. He won't anticipate it. I just need him to move aside. Rachel. Get out of the path. I was deeply affected by those statements. One night, following yet another vicious altercation, Rachel declared she would spend the weekend with a friend in order to recuperate. I refrained from arguing. I feigned indifference that I did, however, follow her. Miles away from everything, she drove out of town and into the forests outside Canton. At last, she arrived at a dilapidated cabin, secluded. As I watched her enter, my heart pounded in my chest. She was joined a few minutes later by the man from the school. I could see well enough through the partially damaged blinds, but I couldn't hear what they were saying. They weren't only sharing a bed. They had plans. Her papers were strewn all over the table. Maps, anything with my name written on it. Terrified, I retreated. Rachel asked me to accompany her on a walk 2 weeks later. We must speak in a peaceful place. Despite all of my instincts telling me to stay, I still harbored feelings for her. Answers were still sought. I therefore concurred. Near the same forests, we took a drive. There was a gentle crunch of snow beneath our boots. As we continued to move beneath the trees, my breath poured out in clouds. She abruptly stopped and faced me with the same icy look she had on the night I confronted her. "You should have just let it go, Daniel," she replied. I heard a branch snap behind me before I could inquire what she meant. Holding something in his hand, the man emerged from the trees. A rope. I ran. Like I had never run before, my legs surged. My face was beaten by branches. Behind me, snow blasted up. Fear kept me going despite the burning in my lungs. Behind me, their thumping footsteps reached my ears. I heard Rachel yelling, "Don't let him get away." I stumbled, caught myself, kept running. At that point, I noticed a tiny cabin up ahead. As though anticipating my arrival, the door creaked open. My stomach turned around. Never again. Not their trap. I took a wrong turn and ran into the night. However, the woods went on and on. My legs failed me. I struck a tree head first. My skull exploded with pain. The world turned dark. I found myself in a hospital bed as I opened my eyes. Machines beeping gently, white walls. A physician bent over me. "You're fortunate. You got hit in the head. You were discovered by the roadside by some hikers. You'll be all right." By the side of the road. My final recollection was of falling in the woods. How did I escape? I was transported there by whom? I was questioned by the police, but I was unable to tell them everything. How could I respond? That my wife and her lover attempted to entice me into the woods so they could murder me? She had ideas and maps. Without evidence, they would laugh me out of the station. However, Rachel never visited the hospital. She didn't come. Days later, she was gone when I returned home. She arranged her belongings. There was silence, no goodbye, no letter. It has now been 6 months. The house seems deserted, not by ghosts, but rather by treachery. I still receive those unidentified texts on some evenings. "She's not done yet. Be mindful of your back." I have no idea who is sending them. Rachel, perhaps. Perhaps him. Perhaps another person. All I know is that I always feel like I'm being watched when I go outside at night. Like I was followed home by the trees. Additionally, I swear that I occasionally hear the floors creaking in the middle of the night when I wake up, as though she has returned. Like the plan hasn't ended. When I discovered my marriage wasn't what I had assumed it was, I was 34 years old. Not because of a single shocking discovery. Not because you caught her in a betrayal a la Hollywood. No, it was gradual. Little things that didn't add up, little cracks that appeared, until finally I was unable to pretend any longer. I'm from Ravenbrook, Ohio, and my name is Darren Cole. It's basically industries, neighborhoods, a downtown with a few overly ambitious restaurants, and a university that supports the local economy. It's not a particularly noteworthy city, the kind that appears in movies. I was employed as an IT technician for a logistics company and had lived there my entire life. I spent my days patching servers, repairing printers, and feigning amusement at the same cheesy jokes from men who couldn't remember their passwords. Although it wasn't flashy, it covered expenses. Then there was my wife, Marissa Hale. We had 6 years of marriage. People would have assumed we were solid from the outside. We shared a 2-bedroom apartment on Ravenbrook's west side, a little balcony with dead plants that I promised to restore every spring, and a seemingly stable routine that included supper together most nights, the occasional movie, and trips when money allowed. However, stability might be a facade. Things about Marissa began to catch my attention. When she was at home, she kept her phone on the table, face down. She never gave a detailed account of the client dinners. I knew her pay couldn't support the new outfits with price tags that appeared in her closet. I initially told myself that I was insecure, envious, and paranoid. I didn't want to be like my father, who I had grown up seeing accuse my mother of things she never done. I took in stride for months. However, it was on a Friday in late autumn that it truly struck me, the night I was unable to ignore it any longer. Marissa announced that she would be having supper with an out-of-town client. I ordered a pizza, nodded, and urged her to enjoy herself. I waited for her while browsing Netflix on the couch. Midnight arrived and left. Next, 1 a.m. I texted her at 2. "Are you okay?" No response. I went directly to voicemail. It was around 4 a.m. when she finally entered the room. The pizza was still cold in its box when I sat at the kitchen table. She had a distinct perfume scent in addition to whiskey. Faint yet distinct. Not mine. A lengthy dinner? I inquired. I didn't mean for my voice to sound that hushed. She paused in the doorway and then chuckled. I apologize. Customers continued placing orders. It grew late. Ich gazed ahead. Her hair was a bit too disheveled for supper, with her makeup smudged at the corner. At the corner of her jaw, I noticed a thin line of lipstick. She didn't own it. "Marissa," I said. "With whom were you?" She looked away after a fleeting moment of eye contact. "Clients, I told you." I refrained from pushing. I simply nodded. "Correct." She slipped into bed that night and was asleep in a matter of minutes. Every nerve in my body was pulsing like a live wire as I lay there looking up at the ceiling. I began to watch after that. Her phone began to buzz more frequently. She would grin at mails, but they never identified the sender. I could smell perfume that wasn't hers clinging to her skin after she had arrived home late and jumped right into the shower. Then the tipping point arrived. The night was a Wednesday. I claimed a server crash and left work early. I parked 3 blocks from her office rather than go home. I watched her leave around 7:45, but she was accompanied by a man, tall and well-dressed. He laughed with her as if they were sharing a personal joke. Then I noticed it. As they crossed the street, his hand touched the small of her back. Ethan Ward was that person. At the moment, I didn't know his name, but I would shortly. With my heart racing and my palms perspiring, I trailed behind them. They entered an 8th Street wine bar. I watched them sit close through the window, her leaning toward him as they laughed in a way she hadn't done with me in years. Across the table, his hand touched hers. I wanted to burst through the door. I wanted to yell, demand answers, and turn the tables, but instead I sat in my car until my eyesight became blurry from tears that I would not stop. She pretended nothing had happened when she arrived home at 11:30 that evening. As though she hadn't recently been with another man, she kissed my cheek, inquired about my eating habits, and curled up on the couch beside me. It was more than I could handle. In the days that followed, I began to dig. I never imagined that when she left her laptop, I would be checking her emails. Open, searching her purse for receipts, following her car when she claimed to be departing, attending late meetings, and everything I discovered supported my suspicions. Hotel receipts, 2-person dinner bills, and texts concealed in her phone under a phony contact with the name work. It was more than a simple affair. It was intimate, frequent, and planned. It had been late on a Sunday night when I confronted her. I was unable to contain myself. I said in a shaky voice, "Marissa." "For what length of time?" On the couch, she was folding laundry. She stopped. "What are you saying? You've been seeing him for how long?" She trembled. Her eyes widened and then narrowed as she gazed up at me. "Who?" "Don't." With a burning throat, I spoke. "Don't make fun of me. You're screwing Ethan, the man from your office, in hotels while I sit at home looking foolish." I was afraid I might suffocate in the prolonged silence. I felt a part of me die at that moment when she finally murmured, "2 years." "What?" Tears filled her eyes, and all I could do was whisper. I wanted to scream, to angry. "Darren, I'm not sure. I simply don't know. I didn't plan for this. I didn't mean to hurt you, but she did." And now there was no turning back. Everywhere in the apartment felt poisoned. Her laugh, her smell, her touch, all of it was tainted. She pleaded with me to try to work it out in therapy, but how could I? She had built a whole secret life behind my back. The nightmares began, and at first I thought they were stress, but they got darker. I would wake up soaked, and the more I sunk into the betrayal, the worse it got. One night, I woke up to the sound of Marissa's voice, whispering in the living room, and I thought maybe she was on the phone, but when I got up and walked in, the room was empty. Another night, I smelled Ethan's cologne in our bedroom, sharp, musky, and unmistakable, even though he had never set foot in our home. It was as if the affair itself had taken on a life of its own, haunting me. The last straw was when I woke up to the sensation of weight on my chest, unable to move or breathe, and when I looked, I screamed as Marissa straddled me, her face contorted, her eyes black, and she kept whispering Ethan's name. The fear was genuine, though, and the following morning I packed my bags and moved across town to a one-bedroom apartment. Papers were filed, Marissa cried, begged, and pleaded, but I was unable to leave. Even without her, though, the nightmares continued to haunt me. I still hear whispers at night. I still smell cologne that isn't mine. Sometimes I wake up convinced someone is in the room with me, and occasionally I swear I see her. Not Marissa as she was, but Marissa as she appeared that night in the nightmare. Hollow, empty, whispering Ethan's name. I'm not sure if it's trauma or if something darker followed me out of that marriage, but I do know that betrayal doesn't just break your heart. It changes something inside you forever. And some nights when I'm lying awake in the silence, I wonder if I'll ever truly be free of her, or if she and what she did will haunt me until the day I die. My name is Adrian Cross, and for the past 3 years, I have been operating a private investigation agency out of a small office above a pawn shop on Harrison Avenue in Brookfield, a city that gleamed with glass towers during the day and drowned in neon haze at night. My life appeared straightforward from the outside. A bachelor, hardworking, trustworthy, the type of man who could be trusted to sort out lies for a fee. My reputation for discretion had quickly grown. Husbands suspicious of wives, wives suspicious of husbands, business partners who smelled fraud. It didn't matter. If someone wanted the truth, they came to me. However, I was in love with Elena Mercer, a woman who was someone else's property. She was 30 years old, elegant without ever feeling forced, with auburn hair that caught light like fire and green eyes that dared me to believe her when she told me that she wasn't happy at home, that her marriage was a cage, that her husband was a man she no longer recognized, and that she wanted freedom. She wanted me. I believed her. God help me. I wanted to believe her. However, when you spend your life uncovering other people's secrets, you should know better than to believe your own will remain hidden. The knock at the office came on a Wednesday morning. I was drinking lukewarm coffee and reading the Brookfield Gazette as I usually did in the mornings, acting as though printed words were still important. The rain was tapping steadily and softly against the window when the knock came. 3 sharp raps, firm and purposeful. "Come in," I called. The door opened and a man entered, who appeared to have clothed himself in caution, with a charcoal suit that was too well-fitting to be purchased off the rack. Tall, slender hair with silver streaks combed back, and rimless glasses perched on a nose that seemed designed for disapproval. "Cross?" Grant Mercer inquired in a low, reserved voice. "That's me," I responded, getting up from my chair to shake his hand. He had a firm but gentle grasp, that was more appropriate for boardrooms than building sites. His name made me gasp. Mercer, Elena's husband, I murmured, keeping my face motionless. Please sit, I added, trying to keep my voice calm. What can I do for you? You come highly recommended, he continued, putting his hands together as he sank himself into the chair across from me. His eyes darted across the room before settling on mine. Discreet, reliable. I need that. That's what I offer, I said, giving one nod. With his elbows resting on his knees, he leaned forward. I have good cause to think my wife is cheating on me. The words cut me like a knife. I understand. I succeeded. Do you want me to verify your suspicions? Yes, I want you to follow her. Find out where she goes and who she meets. I don't want guesses. I want proof. He took a little package out of his coat pocket and tossed it across my desk. It contained a check and a photograph, and as I opened it, my gut nodded. Elena's face grinned up at me from the glossy print. The conflict. I made myself look at it like any other case file, but my hand shook a little as I slid the picture back into the envelope. Almost mechanically, I said, I can do that. How long would you like me to run the surveillance? Grant said, 2 weeks. That should be enough. Unless you think longer is necessary. 2 weeks will do. Good. I'll trust you with the rest. After nodding, he got up to go, giving me one last measured look. I suppose your discretion is as good as I've been told. It is, I said, my throat dry. Then we'll talk again soon. I sank back into my chair as the door closed behind him. My heart was pounding. I looked at the picture once more, Elena's smile burning into my throat. This was the trap I'd set for myself. If I told Grant the truth, I would lose Elena and ruin my business in one blow. If I lied, I would be caught, and Grant Mercer was not a man I wanted as an enemy. I opened my desk bottom drawer, took out a bottle of scotch, and poured a glass. As the burn hit my throat, I made my choice. Daniel Hayes, my new operative, was young, eager, and sharp. He didn't know about Elena, so he would follow her, record her movements, and give me the report. Then I would filter the truth, or at least that was the plan, the investigation. For the next 2 weeks, I avoided Elena at all costs. No calls, no late-night visits, no stolen kisses, because I told myself it was safer that way and that she would thank me after the storm passed. Daniel, on the other hand, threw himself into the case with the kind of energy that only rookies had. He brought back notes, times, places, and details every night. He told me she's careful, but not careful enough, and I made myself not to ask any questions. By the end of the 2 weeks, Daniel was practically glowing. He smiled and said, I'll have the full report typed up by morning. It's thorough. You're going to like it. However, he wasn't ready when morning arrived. Grant Mercer entered my office at precisely 10 o'clock. He appeared composed and expected answers. Good morning, Mr. Mercer, I said, forcing a smile. Would you like some coffee? It would be pleasant. I poured us both cups, the steam curling between us. My palms were sweating. Just then, Daniel entered, a folder in hand. Morning, boss. Mr. Mercer? After giving me a courteous nod, he handed me the file, which I opened quickly, took out the original report, and slid to Grant, keeping the duplicate face down in front of me. Grant read the report without making any changes to his expression, turning each page steadily, and when he was done, he closed the folder and turned to face me. 3, he said. Beg your pardon? I asked. He tapped the folder. That's what your report says, isn't it? Thorough work. Painful, but thorough. I felt the bottom drop out of my stomach. I was afraid of something like this. 3 lovers in 2 weeks. My blood ran cold. What? I looked through the pages, my eyes devouring the words. Elena seen at a cafe with one man, leaving a hotel with another, meeting yet another. You seem surprised, Mr. Cross, he said softly. Don't you believe your own report? I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. My chest felt heavy, my hands numb. Daniel's work was meticulous. Too meticulous. I stared at the evidence, my throat closing. 3. Not just one. Not just me. 3. When I finally looked up, Grant was watching me with a small, knowing grin. The words sank like stones. Thank you for your work, he said, clipped. Your discretion is appreciated. There are some women you just can't trust. No matter what they say, no matter how much they smile. Some people are simply hollow. Then he disappeared. Sitting silently, I gazed at the duplicate report. Elena's expression froze in pictures of males other than me, men other than her spouse. Piece by jagged piece, the illusion broke. I didn't go to Elena that evening. I did not make a call. Even I didn't drink. I simply sat in my apartment's darkness. Outside, the city is faintly bustling. Every promise, every whisper, every word she had ever spoken to me was replayed in my head. Finding lies had become my life's work. I had been living in one, and still was. I knew what I needed to accomplish by morning. I placed the duplicate report outside her apartment door after writing her name on it and packing it into an envelope. Just the facts, without any notes or justifications. I turned away without turning around. Due to you can't withstand certain lies, and you can't save some women. When I discovered that the person I trusted the most in the world had been deceiving me, I was 34 years old. Ryan Mercer is my name. I was raised in a mid-sized Ohio city. The kind of environment where everyone seems to know just enough about you to make your private life their business. Not too big, nor too small. I got a reliable job in a distribution center as a logistics manager when I graduated from college. Although it wasn't glamorous, work was stable and compensated well. For me, stability had always been important. I met Claire when I was 26. She had a part-time job at a coffee shop close to my workplace. Green eyes, blonde hair, and a grin that attracted others. Despite my lack of confidence, her enthusiasm compelled me to speak, more than I would typically do. After dating for almost 2 years, we bought a townhouse together and were married in an intimate ceremony attended just by our families. Although it wasn't flawless, life was stable. We planned our infrequently taken holidays, drank coffee on Sunday mornings, and binge-watched television on rainy nights. She was adored by my parents. My pals believed that we were that couple that had everything worked out. However, if I'm telling the truth, things began to seem strange around a year ago. Claire was hired by a downtown marketing company. Although she had always worked strange hours, she was suddenly returning home later and later. She had her phone on the counter, face down, stuck to her hand. She began wearing different clothes, doing more makeup before work, and going out with her coworkers more frequently. I reminded myself not to make snap judgments. She was ambitious, after all. I wanted to help her pursue her dream of a career that made her proud. However, the small things began to wear me down. The silent disputes over why she didn't pick up her phone. I couldn't stand it one evening when she avoided making eye contact when I asked basic inquiries like, "Who were you texting?" I said, "Claire," when she entered at approximately 11 p.m., subtly scented with perfume and wine that weren't hers. "We must speak." She smiled at me wearily and dropped her purse on the counter. "Ryan, not tonight. It was a long day for me. Lately, that's every night." I made an effort to speak steadily. "You were where?" "With colleagues." Kicking off her heels, she made her way upstairs. "Don't let this become a thing. Don't let this become a thing." However, it was already a reality. I searched her purse that night while she was taking a shower. I was ashamed of myself. However, I had a strong feeling that I would uncover something. A crumpled receipt from a hotel bar across town was indeed present. 2 nights ago, we had a date with 2 cocktails. She had made no mention of leaving that evening. She informed me that she had a late shift. My chest constricted, but I refrained from confronting her at that moment. I wanted to confirm. I began to pay more attention during the course of the following week. When I entered the room, she would turn her phone face down from the charging position on the nightstand. I picked it up one evening as she was taking another shower. No password. My hands were trembling so much that I nearly dropped it. They were there. Communications. There are hundreds of them. He. Tomorrow at the same time. Last night is on my mind constantly. She. I agree. I'm stuck at work once more, I'll say. He. You're amazing. Claire. She. Don't say that. I sat there looking at the computer, tears welling up in my eyes, the words hazy, my ears ringing. As Elliot worked, the man's name was saved. He was a senior manager, according to a brief check on her company's website. She hummed as if nothing had happened as she emerged from the bathroom with a towel wrapped around her body. I was unable to even gaze at her. I did not immediately confront her. I wish I could declare that I did. Instead, I stayed up at night in bed, listening to her breathing next to me while I stared at the ceiling and wondered how long she had been lying. A week later, things reached a breaking point. She informed me that she had to remain late once more. I went with her. After parking 2 blocks from her office building, I saw her go with her hair down in a style she no longer wore for me and her heels tapping on the sidewalk. She boarded an Uber. I did my best to tail it till it came to a stop at a West Side hotel. Outside, I saw her meet him. Before they entered, he gave her a kiss. Something broke inside of me. That night, I didn't get any sleep. The following day, I skipped meals. I hardly made it to work. I kept playing it over and over in my mind. The way she gave him a smile. The way she smiled at me in the past. At last, I went up to her. "Claire," I stated in a steady, icy tone. "You and Elliot have been having sex for how long?" Her face was devoid of color. "What are you discussing? Don't tell lies." Her phone was tossed onto the table by me. There were still unanswered texts. "I am aware." She clenched her jaw and gazed at me before turning away. "It's not what you think, Ryan. That's precisely what I believe." I had the sensation that my chest was giving way. "You have deceived me for months." Even though she was crying, she didn't say sorry. Not initially, she only muttered, "I had no intention of hurting you. All you have to say is that." My voice broke. "All you can say is that you didn't mean to hurt me, even though you've been skulking about behind my back." At last, she lost it. I have no idea why I did that. I simply had the impression that something was lacking. I felt alive again because of him. I felt like I wasn't enough after hearing those comments. As if the meals, travels, and evenings spent holding her when she sobbed were insignificant compared to the life we had created together. I told her to go. She went to stay with a friend after packing her bag. The next days were the most difficult. Everywhere I looked in our townhouse, her sweater over the chair, her mug on the shelf, the subtle scent of her perfume in the bedroom. I was reminded of her. I was unable to eat or sleep. That word was all I could hear in my mind. Absent. A week after her departure, I woke up one night to the sound of footsteps in the hallway. Heavy and slow. My initial assumption was that she would return to retrieve something. However, there was no answer when I called her name. With my heart racing, I stood up and moved in the direction of the commotion. There was nobody in the hall. However, I noticed something as soon as I turned back to face the bedroom. A tall, gaunt shadow with a head tilt that no human head should have. It was standing in our bedroom doorway. I stood there staring at me. My mouth became parched. I muttered, "Claire," but I knew it wasn't her. The shadow remained motionless. Then, slowly, it pointed at me with a raised hand. I almost tripped over my own feet as I staggered back. I blinked and it vanished. The first night was the one. It has been occurring more frequently ever since. The shadow always points and never speaks while I'm by myself in the kitchen, in the bathroom mirror, or standing right outside the window at night. I'm not sure if it's genuine or just my mind processing the betrayal. I occasionally question whether it represents my guilt for not recognizing sooner and for not being sufficient. At other moments, I question whether something deeper has taken hold of me and is consuming my rage, heartache, and emptiness. The townhouse is no longer where I live. Being there was becoming intolerable to me. Claire is permanently gone. She moved in with Elliot, I heard. Perhaps they're content. Perhaps she discovered what she was looking for. I can't get over it, though. Not really, because the shadow follows me everywhere. It lurks in every room's corners. When I wake up at night, it's waiting at the foot of my bed. And it points at me like it's saying, "This is your fault," every single time. Additionally, perhaps it's warped in some way.